Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I'm in the clouds right now. I am really into family. You know, growing up, you may as well have called our place Stucker Hotel. It must have been more than a year I got bumped out of my bed for company. So that's just kind of part of my core, part of my fabric. And in the last 7 days, my brother Norm's been here from Denver. Our daughter Karis is here from North Carolina. And right now, my sister's daughter, Catalia, and her new husband, Nathan, is here, and their 4-month-old baby. My wife is an absolute baby lover. So it's really been good here. A lot of good stuff going on. And 2 days ago, I had something happen I'm very excited about. I did almost 4 hours of interviews in one day. I've never done that before. So I did what's more than a 2-hour total deep dive into the University of Georgia with David Graves. David Graves is a director of admission. He's been there 27 years. He knows that school upside down, inside out. I think you guys are going to like that. That'll air over 5 weeks starting on the 12th of September. I did some longer interviews, a little bit longer than normal, knowing I was going to be in California, and crazy schedule when I'm there. So I'm trying to get these interviews out of the way. So that's one you guys can look forward to. And then on the same day, I also interviewed Aaron Wolf, the director of financial aid at Bucknell, for more than an hour and a half. And it got very technical at times, hopefully not dry. But if you listen to this interview and take notes, you will be, I would say, in the top 1/1000th of people, or 0.1%, when it comes to your knowledge of why college aid offers are all over the place. Because we go through 17 reasons why college aid offers are all over the place. And I just think you're going to become incredibly knowledgeable. So I'm very pumped about that. That interview will go live on the 22nd of September, which is a Monday. And if my math is correct, that should be episode 468. And that'll also be a 5-parter as well. And I'm also pumped because I'm in California in 5 days. That's right. Very, very, very excited. We do have one change. So we originally had our event on 9/12 in San Diego. And we immediately added another event on 9/11 in San Diego because we were told that there were 2 high schools that were going to be sending students in sizable numbers. And so we didn't want to have no space for what your College Bound Kid listeners. Well, it turns out both of those high schools have back to school night on that date. So that's freed up some space. So now we can have that 9/11 group move. 9/11, that sounds weird. The event on, I guess it is 9/11. Oh my goodness. Now that I think about it, that's crazy. The event that was going to be on 9/11, we can have that join the 2 San Diego groups and have them together, which I'm very excited about. As far as our group in Redwood City, that's on the 19th of September, we have room for 7 more families. And we also have room for 7 more families on the event on the 22nd in Santa Monica, California. And Susan and Vince will also be there for that one. So we would love to see you. I know I would love to see you. I'm going to be in California for 24 days. So you can come out and meet us by going to yourcollegebounkid.com events, or you'll see the events tab and sign up for the date that works for you. 9/11 in San Diego, 9/19 in Redwood City, 9/22 in Santa Monica. So on today's episode, I am going to talk about Save Plan and changes on the Save Plan. I've gone back and forth on this because it keeps changing, and I don't want to keep talking about it every other week. It's kind of depressing because most of the changes I'm not really excited about. I don't think you will be either. But there's some significant ones this week. I feel I need to address it. And then instead of doing like a bunch of recommended resources, in the month of September on our Thursday episode, I'm going to do several recommended resources for you, and they're all going to be related to one thing, the Common App. So I'm going to give you several really good resources related to the Common App, and then we'll have part 3 of 5, Vince's interview with Sarah Lovely on the arts and admission. So without any further ado, we'll dive into our content today, looking at what's going on with the Save Plan. So the Supreme Court came down this week, and they basically had not a definitive decision, but a temporary ruling. So basically, millions of student loan borrowers are in limbo because what the Supreme Court decided to do was to keep in place a block that had been put on Joe Biden's student loan repayment plan known as SAVE, which is an acronym for Saving on a Valuable Education. Saving, S, A, and then valuable, V, education. So that's where they get the word save. Pretty clever. And that's going to be on hold, at least until the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals rules. And they have to do a ruling, whether it's lawful. And some people think it's going to take weeks. Some people think it's going to take months. I did a whole deep dive on SAVE on episode 373, and it was one of the most significant policy changes that has happened in years, maybe decades, when it comes to, loan forgiveness and making loan debt more affordable for students to pay back. So for roughly 8 million people who had enrolled in SAVE, that's a lot of people. Since the Biden administration put SAVE in plan last year, the plan was promising much lower monthly payments and a much faster path to loan forgiveness compared to other repayment plans. But in response to what had become a real deep legal fight or battle, DOE, which is Department of Education, last month paused the payments for every borrower enrolled in the plan. And then this back and forth has resulted is very confusing. And I'm generally really into following stuff related to money. My head has been spinning, reading stuff, watching stuff, looking at stuff, trying to get my handle on this thing. So, it's confusing for 22-year-olds, student borrowers, trying to figure out how much they owe and whether or not their payments are going to be reduced or they're going to have to go back into another plan, whether or not loan forgiveness was going to occur. And it's been very unclear whether the court's block applies to debt relief and how it impacts the other student loan repayment plans as well. Remember, there's several other student loan repayment plans besides SAVE. So this week's Supreme Court order is just the latest development in what's been a battle for a couple months now. And it began when 2 lawsuits were filed in a very conservative court in Missouri, 8th Circuit Court, that basically the St. Louis Appeals Court is stacked with appointees that are conservative, and they basically have attempted to block this from going through. Remember, people have already been enrolled. So what do borrowers need to know? Well, now payments are paused for SAVE borrowers. So that's the good news, right? The roughly 8 million borrowers currently enrolled in SAVE, they have been placed in an interest-free forbearance currently, and they are not required to make monthly student loan payments while all this mess gets sorted out. Now, by enrolling in SAVE, these borrowers had been promised that their monthly payments would be basically about half of what they would normally be required to pay with other repayment plans. And they were also promised that student loan forgiveness could occur for as little as 10 years. Now, that's mostly if it was all undergraduate federal debt. This is not private debt. This is federal debt. And then it was 25 years if it was graduate debt, but at a much, much, much lower rate. And if somebody doesn't qualify at all for payments, they might only have to pay $0, and that would still count for them being on the clock toward loan forgiveness. The pause on payments is considered really good news for a lot of people, but there's a negative. It does have potential to delay student loan forgiveness, because while students are in forbearance, that's like the period where you don't have to pay because of the pause, there have been times when you're in forbearance and it counts toward your time on the clock for loan forgiveness. But they've been very explicit that while students are in forbearance, it will not reduce their time on the clock toward public service loan forgiveness, also known as PSLF. This is the plan where public sector workers that work in like nonprofit organizations can see their remaining student debt wiped away if they make 120 on-time qualified monthly payments. Now, the federal government has several other repayment plans. We've talked about them in depth with Emily Griffin way back on the podcast. That was some serious technical podcasts we did back in like 2019 and 2020. So there's several other repayment plans as well. And they have fairly generous terms, particularly for low-income borrowers. And these other income-driven plans that tie monthly payments to the borrower's income and household size, they can reduce how much borrowers have to pay each month. They are also paused as well. Currently, student loan servicers have paused all these payments as a result of the Eighth Circuit's temporary block on the SAFE plan. Now, this pause on the application processing could cause a lot of problems for recent college grads who are going to enter into repayment in the fall. For now, these borrowers may be stuck with the automatic enrollment in the standard 10-year plan, and that has much higher monthly payments. So honestly, I'm personally advising people just to watch this carefully because the ruling is expected to come down possibly in weeks, definitely. Well, I can never say definitely, but probably in months, if not in the next few weeks. So hopefully that's clears up some of the confusion. Like I said, there are 8 million people in SAVE. There's another 2.6 million that are in some of the other repayment plans, such as what's called as PAYE, P-A-Y-E, which is another acronym that stands for Pay As You Earn. And there's another one known as ICR, which is the Income Contingent Repayment Plan. And those payment plans have 20 years before, your debt is abrogated for undergraduate enrollment. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about resources. That's technical. And if you don't have loan debt or that's not in your, wheelhouse or purview, that I probably seriously just put you to sleep. But hopefully I won't with this. So when it comes to the Common App, there are a lot of really good resources out there. Really good resources. And that's the main way people apply to college. So I would like you guys to know them. And I thought about doing one each week, but I'm just going to do them here so that you can have them all now because, if you're applying rolling admissions or early action, some people are submitting applications already. So there's what's known as Explore Common App, and they have an Explore page, and you can search for schools here. You can search by the mission. You can search by location and other filters. Another service is something called Reach Pathfinder, and this helps students to find colleges that match up with different goals that they have. You just have to download Reach Pathfinder, and you'll find a sheet, a one-page overview. Might be a couple pages, but it's pretty detailed that shows you how to utilize this tool. Common App also has application guides. Now, these are great. They provide tips. They provide best practices in submitting quality applications. So all of this is really designed not only for the do-it-yourselfer, but even someone who's working with somebody needs to avail themselves of these tools. And they have an application guide for transfer students. They have another application guide for first-year students. Another great tool is something called Common App Ready. This is a toolkit It's in Spanish, it's in English, and there are resources there when it comes to things like starting your essays and a basic primer on financial aid. And then you guys know I love YouTube University, I call it. So Coming Up's got a pretty good YouTube channel. I'm always sending people the little YouTube videos there on different things, like how to add an advisor. Good 2.5-minute video on that. Recommendations. How do you assign your recommenders? There's a bunch of stuff there. Their YouTube videos are great, but guiding you through the process. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Common App Mobile. So yes, you can have your Common App right on your phone, and you can do a lot of things. You can even write your essay in there, which I do not recommend. You can submit your first year app, which I also don't recommend, but you can do it. I prefer to have it on a big screen when you do the preview. But you can request recommendations on there. You can search for colleges. And another thing can do, which I like, you can keep track of your deadlines and the college requirements because they have a dashboard checklist. You can also get helpful information about up-and-coming deadlines, about remaining tasks that you have to complete in order to submit your application. So Common App Mobile, have a Common App right on your phone.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 3 of Vince's interview with Sarah Lovely, looking at all things related to performing in visual arts and admissions, Sarah says which process is the most difficult when it comes to the arts. Sarah talks about list building for theater students, and she makes a bold statement that any theater major needs to hear. Sarah talks about acting programs. Sarah talks about admissions art interview. Sarah talks about selecting monologues and walk-in auditions. Sarah talks about how students should strike a balance when it comes to list building when you're looking at BA programs, BFA programs, and conservatories. Sarah gives her advice for dance majors, and Sarah talks about the timelines when it comes for dance majors. Listen and enjoy.
In your experience, is there a process, and maybe you can just keep it to the area like dance or visual arts, in terms of challenges in organization, which process do you think is the hardest?
I think that, not to keep coming back to theater, but I do think that theater is a little bit challenging because, with visual arts, you can, as a counselor, you can sort of guide students towards, you're going to need a certain number of portfolio pieces. And yes, it's different for animation at schools like CalArts or Ringling, where you're going to need that sketchbook. But by and large, visual art schools, you're going to need about 10 to 20 pieces, and you're going to want to usually show some range of work, not always. But for I think for theater students, it's interesting. There is a musical theater common pre-screen, which was a sort of an attempt by a lot of schools to try to streamline it a little bit. But I think it is still very difficult because there's wildcard videos, or there's site-specific monologue,
Yes.
or a lot of additional writing. And I think that can be challenging for students to keep track of, particularly when the deadlines are so early.
Yes.
But there is, I will say, as the process goes forward in senior year, it does get easier. Maybe that's really obvious to say, but I think that a lot of students are able to kind of repurpose content for sure with pre-screenings, and also writing. So I guess that's good. But I agree with you, Vince. I think that in some ways it's self-selecting, right? Where it's sort of, only the most dedicated are going to apply.
Yes.
So from a college perspective, I guess that's a good thing, right? But it's also, I have thoughts about it being a little bit inequitable too. It's a lot to absorb for families and students who might not know or might not have the support. Our kids at Walnut Hill, we were dedicated to the arts. It was what we did, but
Yeah.
a lot of kids don't have that. So
Yeah. Well, let's get into like specific like areas, and let's start with theater. Maybe in talking about it, talk about what the process is, and then be as specific in sections that you want to, but sort of give an overview and what you're feeling about creating the list. Because to me, admissions is all about the list. If your list is wrong, it's not going to be pretty. So how do you, if you're a theater person, musical theater person, how do you, what's the timeline and what should the list look like?
Yeah. So I think it's sometimes controversial or annoying when I say this, but I consider pretty much all audition-based programs for theater to be in the reach or far reach category, just by nature of what they are. And it has nothing to do with who you are. It's just something that you need to really acknowledge and move forward from. And so I think that makes it incredibly important for theater students to cast a wide net and to also have BA programs on their list that are very good. When I worked at Walnut Hill, one of my first years, I kept hearing over and over again, I have to go to this school. I have to go to this school. And so one time I just emailed all of the theater students and I said, just email me back with your favorite actor. That's all. And then I compiled that into a list and I looked up where every single person had gone to college. Wow. And so many of them had not done BFA programs. So many of them had just gone and studied either theater at a liberal arts college or, university, or studied something totally different. So I think that I used to hand that out every time I met with families for our theater meeting. Just reminded students, cast a wide net and be open-minded to programs. I also think one of my biggest pieces of advice for theater students is if you think you're musical theater or bust, open yourself up to acting programs, because not only can you apply for both at most schools, which, really opens up your chances a little bit more, acting programs still have a lot of resources to be able to study musical theater. Some schools you can take private voice lessons, you could minor in dance. I mean, you can still have a pretty full experience even as an acting major. So again, it's one of those things, if I could require it, I would. So I also think, you'll have pre-screenings for most musical theater programs. Usually that consists of contrasting songs, contrasting monologues, potentially a dance piece if you're applying to musical theater. And then, that's something that you hand in before, and then you get kind of invited for an audition. So that's more commonplace now than it has ever been before. So I would expect a lot of musical theater places, programs to have that. And for acting too. So, and I really also can't underscore enough the importance of the interview for a lot of theater programs. I used to interview kids when I auditioned them for NYU, and it's really a student's opportunity to show, not just talk about themselves as an artist, but to talk about themselves outside of their art too. One of the questions that I think my colleagues at NYU would ask was, if you woke up tomorrow and you couldn't do theater, didn't exist, what would you do? And, a lot of them would say, oh, I would just die. I need theater. And we would say, that's not what we're looking for. What else matters to you outside of yourself as an artist? And I also think that going back to what colleges put their values into their admission process. I had a student a couple years ago who had an interview at a school. She came back and said, they asked me so many questions about social justice and performance and how I was going to use my art and my voice to better my community. And she loved that because that was her thing, right? But I've had students come back and say, I didn't know how to answer that question. I know. So be prepared to answer questions that are bigger than just, I see that you were in Greece. Or, you did in Greece. Tell me about that. I also think that in terms of selecting material, get help. Ostensibly, people who are applying to BFA programs in theater have hopefully a teacher or a mentor that can help them select songs and monologues that are appropriate for them. We used to say at NYU, don't make me feel uncomfortable. And, as an auditioner, just let your work do the talking, not what you're wearing or not wearing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a great message.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it would be important for you to, as somebody auditioning, to be familiar with the types of programs they offer, because if you see a big social justice component and you're not prepared to talk about, that would be a major issue. Yes. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And then equally, what are your thoughts about the pieces you're doing? Do they sometimes ask you about like the work, and then the student only knows they've never read the whole play?
Yes.
Like they have no sense of what it's really about. So you would say that's also fair game too.
Oh, for sure. I would expect actually that they would ask something about character development. What's happening to your character right before this scene, or what happened right after? Or tell me about how your character fit into the play as a whole. And you're absolutely right. There are a lot of monologue books out there which are great as initial steps, right, for selecting material, but you have got to read those plays. And we would our acting teachers at Walnut Hill would often tell students that the best preparation for choosing monologues was simply read plays. Just be a consumer of theater. So yes, please do read the play or watch the show. Yes. And what I will say also on theater, just kind of a pragmatic piece of advice, is unified auditions are great. So unified auditions are something that happen in cities kind of all over the country. And it's a time when a lot of schools get together the same weekend and hold auditions in kind of similar locations, like the same city. And it gives students an opportunity particularly for some of the smaller programs, for students to do walk-in auditions. And I really encourage students to do that. Sometimes it's a great way to learn about lesser known programs that are still, again, really, really good. And it gives you exposure also. And for a theater student, auditioning as much as possible is great. You're going to be doing a lot of it if you're going to go into a life of theater. So
yes.
Yeah. So look that up.
What's the balance between conservatory, audition-based, BA programs, non-BFA programs for a list? How do you sort of determine that?
So I think it's natural for theater students who are applying to BFA programs to have a little bit more of a reach-heavy list, and probably more so than I would typically feel comfortable with as a student who's applying for another major. So I would say you need to have at least 4 to 6 target / likely schools on your list. And I would not, again, you can't count BFA programs in there. So you need to get pretty comfortable with some BA programs that are within your range kind of academically also.
That's great. That's really important. And I think you're right to stress having non-BFA options on the list, because when talent is a factor, you could have a cold, you just don't hit it off with people watching you. And you might walk out of there thinking I'm a perfect match, and they didn't see it, and you don't get in. Or they already have, they've already admitted, if you're going to regular and they've had like 4 sessions of pre-screens and you're the last group to audition and 20 spaces is all they have and they're at 18.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I encourage students to really not get discouraged by this process either. I see it a lot with my theater students in particular, because these programs have 20 kids and they have 1,000 kids applying, but try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
If you love theater and you love performing, then keep doing it. You can do it in a lot of different places.
And you probably say as well, Sarah, this process is a lot about failure, and failure is just simply someone not giving you the option. But it's sort of like learning to ride the bike. Eventually, you're going to get into this rhythm,
Absolutely.
and in one of your auditions or more than one, you're going to hit the sweet spot, and they're going to see your potential.
Yep.
How do you, this is a great question for any artist, but how do you get them maybe not comfortable, but I often find students when they do summer programs where they're in other situations, they're at Stamps one summer, they're at Carnegie Mellon, they're at UCLA or wherever it is in their local area. They see the range of talent, and they're always putting them in positions where they're putting themselves out there, and it doesn't always work.
Yes.
So how do you encourage students to get out there and be as comfortable as possible with auditioning?
Yeah. So I think it's repetition is definitely, show your work to people, and don't be afraid of feedback too. You don't have to always take it all, but show it to your teachers, perform for your family, perform for your friends, audition for, if it's theater, audition for community theater. If it's visual art, put yourself into Scholastic, apply for young arts for all of the artists. It's just really getting into the habit of, to your point, Vince, being okay with not winning all the time, and it can be hard for kids who are coming from high schools where there typically are the always cast in the lead role, so summer programs are an interesting thing to consider for sure. And there's a broad range of summer programs out there, and broad range of cost too. So you don't need to spend, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, but yeah, I think just repetition is the key.
Okay, great.
Let's
transition to dance. Talk about timeline there, process, and their list. What does their list look like?
Yeah. So again, with these BFA programs, they are reach and far reach schools, and it's very similar to theater, where there are wonderful dance programs housed within liberal arts colleges or that are non-audition based. That doesn't mean that you can't show who you are as an artist. We'll talk about that later when we talk about art supplements. But a lot of dance programs have started instituting pre-screenings. So oftentimes it sort of depends on if you're applying for ballet or for contemporary dance, modern dance. So it just it depends on the program. So it still goes back to look up all of the requirements, and go to try to get your work seen. There's a great program that happens every fall it's through Dance Wave. I think it's called Dance Wave Through College and Beyond, which offers virtual college fair auditions, master classes. It's held in New York City, but you don't have to, I think a lot of it can be done virtually too. So I definitely recommend to my dancers to engage in that. And again, meet with faculty. I have students, a lot of my dancers, when they go to visit schools, actually request to sit in on dance classes, or even a lot of dancers actually participate in dance classes when they go to schools, if that's something that students would feel comfortable with. It's definitely something that a lot of colleges can accommodate. So I would go and check it out, check out the level of offerings at that school. And again, look at past performances, see where their alumni have gone. I think that with dance, there was a time when it was thought that you had to, if you wanted to have a successful career as a dancer, you had to just skip college altogether and go straight to companies, and I have students who have done that for sure. But I think that there's a lot more capacity now for for students to go to college and then still have a successful career as a dancer after college. And then, so the timeline is, fairly similar to theater. There, I would expect some early deadlines in the early fall, probably no earlier than November 1st. And then auditions usually happen throughout the winter. And then you find out around the same time as a normal college might release their decisions.
Friends, this concludes part 3 of Vince's interview with Sarah Lovely. We hope you join us next week for part 4 of 5. Friends, on Thursday's episode, Andy Strickler continues with part 4 of 7, or 8-parter, still deciding if it'll be 7 or 8, on athletic recruiting and college admissions at highly selective colleges. When it comes to a question from a listener, I keep getting this question over and over and over, and that is, what activities should I include and what order should I put them in? So I'm going to share 8 tips to help you with that decision. And then for our interview, Julia and her daughter Laura are here, and I'm excited about this one. They're going to talk about how a parent and a student can work together in partnership to win outside scholarships, external scholarship. What role does the parent play? What role does the student play? They're also going to share some of the mistakes they made along the way. It's a fantastic interview. It's a 1-part interview. I'm very excited about it. And then we'll have the final part of Kevin Newton discussing universities in London. At least the final part for now. Kevin's going to come back and talk about 2 other really Americanized schools that are over in London that we didn't focus on in this series. So friends, I want to share a story. It comes from my time in track and field. Many a time at track meets, and I was hardcore into track in 10th grade, in 11th grade, indoor track, outdoor track, all year track. I was just really, really serious about it. But I saw many a track meet where a runner had a lead in a race and they slowed down. They took the foot off the pedal. And right at the finish line, somebody blew by them. Now, in track, we have a name for the finish line. We call it the tape. So I was talking to a student recently, a senior that I'm helping, and he said to me, do you have any advice for my senior year? And all of a sudden, my track days, which are like 40 years ago, popped into my mind. And I told him the story about somebody that looked like they had the race completely won. And then they slowed down. They took their foot off the gas pedal and they weren't successful. And so what I told that senior is what I'm telling you today, which is simply this: run through the tape. Run through the tape. Don't take your foot off the gas pedal. Finish strong. No senioritis, no senior slump. You have next summer to rest. Run through the tape. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.